Countless fearless women reshaped wars, science, and revolutions, and their names barely survive in the footnotes. Centuries of biased record-keeping and tidy narratives have erased whole chapters of badass lives, leaving us with a history that feels incomplete. We're pulling those chapters back into the light. Real stories, concrete facts, and the moments that changed everything. You'll meet a guerrilla leader who turned a fishing village into a military force, a mathematician who cracked enemy codes and vanished from the record books, and a queen who rewrote diplomatic rules while courts pretended she didn't exist. By the end, you'll have names, dates, and the exact moves that make these women impossible to forget, plus a sharper eye for spotting erased heroes in any era. Stick around, share this with someone who loves hidden history, and tell us which forgotten woman you want dug up next. 1. Introduction to erased female heroes. Textbooks and museum plaques often tell a selective version of the past, leaving out the women whose discoveries, courage, and inventions reshaped fields from science to civil rights. Mary Anning's fossil finds helped establish paleontology as a science, yet her contributions were frequently reported by male colleagues. Rosalind Franklin's 10th ray images provided key evidence for the structure of DNA, even as Nobel-winning narratives sidelined her role. Hedy Lamarr co-patented a method that would later become foundational to modern wireless communication, while her identity as an actress eclipsed her inventor's work. These are not abstract omissions. They are specific recurring patterns: archival bias, exclusion from professional societies, and cultural storytelling that favors certain faces over others. The consequence is twofold. Entire communities lose access to role models, and the historical record becomes distorted. Addressing that erasure requires intentional recovery strategies. Scholars, archivists, educators, and community historians can collaborate to surface documents, patents, court filings, personal letters, and photographs that restore context and credit. Practical remedies exist: reattributing work in academic citations, commissioning museum exhibits that foreground overlooked figures, digitizing collections so local histories become globally accessible, and updating curricular standards to include diverse biographies. Small institutional changes ripple outward. When a school assigns primary source research on a lesser-known activist or scientist, students meet a wider range of models for success. Recognition follows evidence, and evidence can be found. Concrete methods make the recovery work manageable. Start with primary source mining. Search patent offices for inventor filings. Consult regional newspaper archives for arrest reports or lecture notices, and examine museum accession records for specimen provenance. Mary Anning's specimens, for instance, are traceable through natural history collections, even when early publications credited others. Use oral history techniques to collect family memories and community stories that never made it into print. Leverage digital tools. Crowdsourced transcription projects unlock handwritten letters. GIS mapping can reveal networks of collaborators. Institutional repositories can host biographies and scanned documents. Case studies help. Claudette Colvin's early refusal to give up her bus seat and subsequent role as a plaintiff in legal challenges demonstrates how legal filings and local court records can reshape narratives about civil rights leadership. Hedy Lamarr's patent paperwork shows the technological lineage that links entertainment and communication technologies. Follow the paper trail. Integrating recovered stories into public life is the final step. Teachers can build modules that compare primary sources with later summaries, showing students how narratives are constructed. Museums can pair artifacts with the fuller stories of the people who produced them, and local historical societies can organize public talks that invite communal memory. Media makers, podcasters, documentary filmmakers, journalists can amplify archival finds to broader audiences. Tech communities benefit too. Hackathons that trace the ancestry of algorithms back to overlooked inventors not only educate but inspire innovation with a conscience. Partnerships between universities and community groups make these actions sustainable and reciprocal. You can help right now. Pick one forgotten woman, dig into patent databases, archives, or local newspapers, then share what you find, in a classroom, on social media, or with a nearby museum. Support digitization projects and oral history initiatives. Nominate under-recognized figures for talks, plaques, or award programs. Small contributions add up, and collective effort finally gives these badass women the attention and credit history once denied them. 2. Khutulun, Mongolian warrior princess. A woman who combined skill on the battlefield with undeniable political heft, Khutulun arose from the inner circles of Mongol power as both warrior and strategist. She was the daughter of Khaidu, a leading figure who resisted rival branches of the Mongol Empire, and contemporaries recorded her as a trusted lieutenant in campaigns across the steppe. Chroniclers from different traditions remembered her for two striking traits: unmatched prowess as a wrestler and horsewoman, and a readiness to take command when the situation demanded it. Those simple facts cut against the stereotype that medieval steppe warfare was only a man's world. The problem was not that her feats didn't happen, but that they were flattened or romanticized by later tellings, often reduced to a single anecdote about suitors and horses. The solution is to treat her life as a multifaceted case study in leadership under pressure, not as a curiosity destined for folklore. By returning to the contemporary sources, Persian court historians and travelers' accounts, and reading them alongside Mongol traditions, a fuller picture emerges. A leader who marshaled cavalry, advised on strategy, and enforced discipline among troops. That shifts the conversation from spectacle to substance. Details matter. She reputedly set a public challenge. Men who wished to marry her had to wrestle her, and the losers paid a forfeit in horses. Contemporary narratives emphasize how that practice did three things at once. It protected her autonomy, redistributed wealth into her control, and publicly displayed her physical dominance. On the battlefield, she did not merely ride at the front. Commanders reported relying on her to lead detachments, scout enemy movements, and exploit the steppe's mobility. Persian and European writers of the time noted her presence on war campaigns and described her as someone whose opinion carried weight in council. There are also accounts suggesting her father at times considered her as a possible successor, but clan politics and the preference for male heirs complicated succession in ways that sidelined her despite her capabilities. Putting these episodes into our present-day toolkit is straightforward and practical. Use her example when rethinking leadership programs. Insist that competence, not prescribed gender roles, determine responsibility. Incorporate her story into curricula about military history and gender studies as a way to challenge assumptions. For organizations, adapting a leadership module around her life could combine physical training, tactical decision-making simulations, and exercises in negotiating power, mirroring how she combined force, reputation, and political savvy. Creators can also ground fiction and film portrayals in the texture of the sources rather than one-note myth-making, which helps audiences appreciate complexity. Act on it. Read the primary chronicles, seek out museum exhibits and scholarly translations, and put her narrative into classrooms, podcasts, and local history projects. Share authenticated excerpts and commission balanced portrayals. If you mentor emerging leaders, use her as a prompt to discuss merit, visibility, and the ways institutions obscure capable people. Her life offers practical lessons about authority earned in action and the importance of preserving those stories accurately. And now is the moment to make sure she is recalled for the full measure of what she did. 3. Lyudmila Pavlichenko, Soviet sniper. Credited with 309 confirmed kills, Lyudmila Pavlichenko ranks among the deadliest snipers in recorded conflict. Her record is not just a tally, it exposes a problem that still echoes: the way official histories compress or erase the full scope of women's frontline contributions. Many people picture combat as exclusively male, and that mental shorthand makes it easy for stories like hers to slip from public memory, even when their impact was unmistakable. The solution to that erasure is straightforward, but demanding. Recover and amplify detailed accounts, tactics, and testimony, so her example can reshape how we teach and remember wartime service. Pavlichenko's trajectory, from a civilian student to a decorated sharpshooter, offers concrete lessons in training, discipline, and resilience. She fought in the brutal sieges on the Eastern Front, operated with the standard-issue Mosin Nagant sniper rifle outfitted with a PU scope, and developed patient fieldcraft, careful concealment, meticulous range estimation, and the psychological steadiness to wait for a single decisive shot. She was wounded in action, removed from frontline duty because of those injuries, and then put her combat experience to work by training other snipers and serving as a public figure to bolster Allied support. Details matter. Her tally of confirmed kills includes soldiers and officers across multiple fierce engagements, and her presence on the front lines shattered gender expectations in a military system under extreme pressure. After combat wounds ended her active sniping, she toured North America as part of a Soviet delegation, meeting public figures like Eleanor Roosevelt, and speaking directly to crowds and policymakers to explain the Soviet struggle and to build transnational sympathy and material backing. The honors she received from her own government recognized tactical proficiency and a symbolic breakthrough. Women could, and did, excel in roles traditionally reserved for men. Integrating Pavlichenko's story into modern practice means more than adding a name to a list. Military training programs can study her methods, fieldcraft, patience, observational discipline, and adapt those fundamentals to contemporary marksmanship and reconnaissance instruction. Educational curricula should present her as an example of leadership under stress. She mentored less experienced shooters, adapted to new roles after being wounded, and translated combat credibility into persuasive advocacy on the international stage. Museums, documentaries, and classrooms that include her photographs, personal statements, and verified service record help correct a distorted cultural memory that too often sidelines women's wartime agency. If her life teaches anything actionable today, it is this: preserve primary sources, teach tactical as well as human stories, and insist that historical narratives reflect the full diversity of those who shaped events. Seek out first-person accounts, visit museum collections, support projects that digitize service records, and share well-sourced biographies, so Lyudmila Pavlichenko's example remains visible and useful as a model of skill, courage, and enduring influence. 4. Nancy Wake, World War II, resistance leader. A courier network in Marseille became a lifeline for Allied servicemen, Jews, and anti-Nazi activists trying to slip out of occupied Europe. Nancy Wake, born in Wellington and later a reporter in Paris, turned that lifeline into a razor-sharp instrument against German occupation, running escape lines, ferrying intelligence, and organizing sabotage when the stakes were highest. The Gestapo called her the White Mouse because she slipped through their nets. That nickname captures the problem she faced: a ruthless security apparatus intent on crushing any organized opposition. She solved that problem by turning everyday urban knowledge into guerrilla tradecraft. Fluent in French and English and comfortable in both café society and the back alleys of Marseille, she established safe houses, coordinated routes over mountains and borders, and built a network that moved people and information with astonishing speed. When the net tightened and her work became known, she slipped out across the Pyrenees to Britain, trained with Allied clandestine services, and parachuted back into southern France to link up with the Maquis. Those moves changed the calculus of local resistance. What had been scattered, local acts of defiance, became coordinated, strategic harassment of enemy movements. Details make the picture vivid. She personally guided downed airmen to safe passage, arranged arms drops into isolated rural areas, and helped convert farmers and small-town workers into effective guerrilla units. Her husband, Henry Fiocca, was arrested by the Gestapo and died in custody, a personal cost that hardened her resolve rather than breaking it. In the field, she helped plan ambushes and sabotage operations that disrupted supply lines and communications, and she trained fighters in small unit tactics and the art of blending in until it was time to strike. Britain and France recognized her contributions with top decorations, among them the George Medal from the United Kingdom and high honors from France, testimony from allies that the networks she built and the missions she led had real strategic impact. Her story integrates into modern lessons about resilience, leadership, and asymmetric operations. First, local knowledge is a force multiplier. Nancy's familiarity with towns, transport timetables, and social networks let her move people and materiel where larger forces could not. Second, compartmentalization and trust building are timeless. Small cells, clear escape routes, and reliable couriers made whole operations survivable. Finally, leadership under pressure matters. She was not just a courier, but a commander who coordinated logistics, morale, and tactical decisions across a patchwork coalition of civilians and fighters. Read a credible biography, visit wartime archives, or explore museum exhibits that document resistance work to learn more. Study the way she combined tradecraft, empathy, and relentless action, and apply those principles to modern problems that demand courage and creativity. Support organizations that preserve these stories so future generations remember that strategy, stealth, and resolve often come from unexpected leaders. 5. Stagecoach Mary Fields. Born into slavery in the American South, she walked a path most people of her background were never allowed to choose. After emancipation, she moved west, working wherever she could. on riverboats, for the army, and eventually for a community of nuns at a mission in Montana who relied on her strength and steadiness. Isolated settlements depended on reliable mail and freight, but prejudice and danger meant those jobs were often refused or abandoned. The problem was simple. Remote people needed supplies and communication, and the people they trusted were scarce. She solved that gap herself. Taking on contracts that others shunned, she hauled freight, drove a stagecoach when necessary, and carried the mail between rough outposts. She became one of the first African American women to hold a federal mail contract, a role that required grit, a thick skin, and the ability to defend a route against thieves and bad weather. Those who depended on punctual deliveries found, to their surprise, that this woman moved with the reliability of a clock and the fearlessness of a seasoned frontier hand. Details paint a vivid portrait. She worked for the Ursuline nuns at a mission, doing heavy labor and cooking when called. They trusted her enough to support her later, when she stepped into the mail route. Townspeople remembered a woman who smoked cigars, drank whiskey, and could outhandle many of the men who tried to intimidate her. Stories of her hauling a mail sack on a buckboard, brandishing a shotgun to discourage robbers, and stepping in physically when scuffles broke out became local legend. At the same time, she kept strict standards. Deliveries were made on time, packages intact, and the mission's needs prioritized. That mix of rough edges and uncompromising dependability is why so many people who once doubted her came to defend her honor. Bring her into today's work and classrooms as a study in practical leadership and refusal to accept imposed limits. Use her story to teach logistical problem solving, how to assess risk, maintain equipment and routes, and build community trust under adverse conditions. Her life also offers lessons about boundary setting and asserting professional standards in hostile environments. She defended the mail, and in doing so enforced accountability across a frontier economy that otherwise tolerated laxity and favoritism. If you want to honor that legacy, start small and local. Add her story to lesson plans or public history tours, check whether local museums or markers preserve her memory, and support efforts that document the lives of overlooked figures. Read primary accounts from frontier newspapers and mission records, visit the places that remember her, and pass the story on. Practical acts that ensure a tough, capable woman who kept a community connected isn't forgotten again. 6. Policarpa Salavarrieta, revolutionary spy. In the kitchens and parlors of Bogotá's elite, a seamstress quietly turned domestic access into a weapon, slipping information between hems and earfuls she gathered while measuring for a dress. That ordinary cover solved a lethal problem for the independence movement. Patriots desperately needed reliable intelligence about troop movements, loyalist sympathizers, and planned arrests, and mail couriers were easily watched. She answered that gap with ingenuity and nerve. Working under the name she became known by, she moved through houses where conversations were meant to be private. As a laundress and seamstress, she catalogued names, loyalties, and habits. She stitched lists and messages into garments and passed coded letters through trusted networks. Her recruitment was as practical as it was bold. She convinced soldiers and servants to defect, funneled recruits to rebel units, and fed commanders information that altered patrols and saved lives. Small acts had big consequences. A hem tucked with a list of officers could change the outcome of a skirmish. Her methods were low-tech and precise. She memorized faces and ranks, used social situations to ask seemingly innocent questions, and translated gossip into tactical intelligence. When networks were compromised, she adapted, switching meeting places, altering signals, and relying on female couriers who aroused less suspicion. Capture was always a risk, and the moment she was seized, she refused to betray her contacts. Her trial ended with the harshest sentence, and her death transformed operational sacrifice into a national rallying point. The legacy is practical as well as symbolic. Today, her life teaches how asymmetrical forces exploit social roles to gather critical information. It shows the power of disciplined, low-profile tradecraft and the moral clarity of refusing to trade comrades for self-preservation. Her image has been reclaimed by educators and activists who use her story to broaden narratives about who fights and how freedom is won. Learn her story, bring it into classrooms and community talks, and preserve the small, ingenious acts that change history. They were erased from textbooks, archives, and street names. But the problem isn't that they didn't exist, it's that we stopped looking. The solution is simple and powerful. Tell their stories, amplify their work, and demand they be woven back into the record. To summarize, these women were inventors, strategists, builders, and rebels who changed the course of history. Systemic bias and deliberate silence hid their contributions. Reclaiming them takes attention, research, and action. You felt that spark watching this: outrage, inspiration, a hunger to know more, and that connection matters. Start small. Share one story from this video with a friend. Mention one of these names in class or on social, or add a forgotten figure to your local history group or school library. Support projects and historians uncovering archives, and call out gaps when you see them. Every share and conversation stitches these lives back into our collective memory. If you want more, first I've got a series of deep dives and interviews coming that will spotlight specific women, primary sources, and how you can help preserve their legacies. Tell me in the comments who you want featured next. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and share this video, because remembering them changes the future. Don't let history forget them again.